Okay, good day, people. Thought I'd give a shout out here to this book called Alone Together by Turkle, and it's subtitled Why We Expect More from Technology and Less from Each Other. Really is a great book. It's very readable. It's accessible because of the numerous examples it gives, and I think it's relevant because she's talking about topics that are bearing upon elderly care, about education of the young, and I think about the encroachment of technology, which is happening, my guess is, in all aspects of life. That is the sort of takeover of robotics on one hand, and the degree to which we in our lives are becoming more automated and connected, and I guess growing up acculturated into the digital age. We're sort of digital natives. Okay, there's so much that's going on in the book, and I can't possibly do justice to it in this little video. What I want to do is talk about a couple of themes or a couple of issues that come up, and if you've read the book, please, I would love to get some response. It would be great for people to try to do either reading group on it. If people want to do volley back and forth, I would be happy to engage in some of that. I am concerned about a lot of the issues that she's raising, so I think some further dialogue and discussion would be really great. From my perspective. Okay, the way that I would try to set it up is, I think the first thing to do would be, I guess I want to tell a story about sort of what happened. Okay, and this is sort of what she's suggesting in the book. Okay, it's that there were a number of well-to-do urban professional, kind of East Coasters largely, but it's on both coasts. But a lot of well-to-do parents who they had kids kind of still in the pre-digital mindset, and they were thinking of having kids kind of as insurance policy to take care of them in their old age, but they thought that even if they were going to be dual income parents and gone a lot, they were going to provide for their kids. This notion of being there, and they were busy pursuing their careers, many of the parents, and they thought to themselves, admittedly, I know I'm not home as much as I should be or could be, but I'm going to provide for them, I'm going to send them to a good school, get them a good education, and they will appreciate it later, and hopefully they will take care of me in my old age. And in some way, though, they were absent, or largely absent, and they grew up with, a lot of these kids grew up with the TV babysitter, and as they got older, right, these young people, they were estranged, isolated, felt uncomfortable around people, felt uncomfortable experiencing those vulnerabilities of interaction, started to prefer asynchronous interactions under which they could have a lot more control. And soon enough, in time, the way things are, right, these young people who said, well, Mom and Dad, the TV babysitter was evidently good enough for me, I think robots are going to be good enough for you. And the old people who thought, the kids are busy, and now they're in an old folks' home, and they say, the kids are busy, and they have careers, and they're trying to do all these things, and I guess when my career was busy, I wasn't there either. Well, yeah, I guess I got the robot in the way that the kid got the TV, and it's better than nothing. And this sense of the TV was better than nothing, and the robot will be better than nothing. And so that's I think part of it, right? And so, and it's so hard to set the backdrop. I mean, a lot of it has to do with the rise of robotics. Let me say a word about that before I talk more about the book, is that I think many people are ignorant or just not aware of how much robotics are taking over everywhere, that it's sort of like a dirty little secret among both corporate executives and of international politicians, that when they talk about the loss of jobs and they blame it on outsourcing or jobs lost abroad or across seas, and then they make it seem like other people over there are taking the jobs. Well, it's partly true, but not really. It's largely people setting up camps in other places and it's automation that's doing it. Now, I don't want to deny the existence. I'm not in any way trying to deny sweatshops and all the existence of exploitative labor and that kind of stuff. The point is that when and where automation can exist, it exists. And a lot of the times, those jobs that can be automated, they're expanding, and they're not going to return. They're not going to be a resurgence of new kinds of jobs. I think many people haven't yet thought about what's going to happen when robots take over the bulk of the tasks that people can do. And I want to get very clear on what I mean by a robot. A robot isn't, like Rosie there dusting around in your house. It isn't necessarily that. Now, you can have companion robots, so we can get at the issue of, companion robotics. But I think it's an issue of computing and automation in the larger environment. Just as an example, I was recently in California, and I'd stopped into a gas station that had about 2 or 3 different aisles worth of gas pumps, and this was a fully automated, non-staffed, no-person gas station. You went in there, you swiped a card, or you fed money into it, and you just went out there. If you had a problem, I don't know what you did. You pushed a button and waited for someone to drive over there. There was no person there. Fully automated. Came and got my car out of parking. Again, fully automated machinery that allows you to put your parking in and then grab your car out. Think of ATMs. ATMs have taken a huge toll on the number of banking jobs, right? The number of self-checkout lanes within grocery stores. We don't think of that as a robot, but in some way it is a kind of robotic system, an automated system designed in the environment that does what previously had been done by a person. Okay, so I think part of the way to talk about this book, I really want to give a shout out to it. If you haven't read it, please check it out. It really is. It's worth reading. It's disturbing. It's disquieting. I think a lot of it's not happy news, depending on how you read it. I think if people want to do some video dialogue and exchange, I'd be happy to play devil's advocate and or kind of celebrate some of these developments. So it depends on how we want to say it. But for me, I think the most important, or one of the key concepts to really get at, is what she's calling fearful symmetry. And it's kind of a classic term. I think it goes back, I'm not sure if it was Kessler, I'm not sure who coined fearful symmetry. At any rate, so fearful symmetry for her, what she's talking about is, I guess it's the cross currents that are coming together, and it has to do with the way that we treat one another as robots and the way that we treat robots as humans. These two currents are leading to this sort of trend of expecting a lot more from technology and a lot less from one another, and increasingly we're in these kind of post-family families where we're alone together. The family gets together and they sit around a table and they all have a smartphone. They hardly interact at dinner, and as soon as dinner is over, they all go to their own room and play with their respective gadget that takes them somehow elsewhere. And I think when she's talking about the early story about the TV generation and the people who began the robotics movement, that was, it was parents who were gone, dual income. Now you're starting to get parents who, even though they're dual income, they're almost never there. That is, when they come and pick the kid up from soccer practice, they're with a BlackBerry in hand, and the kid can't get a word in edgewise because the parent is always somehow partly checking email, checking Facebook, multitasking, is dislocated from, participation in a virtual environment. And so in that sense, there's a loss of forms of interaction between one another, and it raises interesting questions about, do people increasingly prefer interactions where they have ultimate control, or where they don't have to feel vulnerable and risk saying something that they then later regret? So there's a preference for some forms of asynchronous interaction, things like email, texting, that even though there are more phones than there ever have been, people are more fearful of the phone. They use the phone to set up an appointment or to schedule something, but they generally don't, young people especially, they don't hang out and talk on the phone. They don't share their lives with one another on the phone. They do it more with images and with little texting comments, little points. I think so. There is that whole sense of learning to treat each other more and more robotically. Now, the point about treating robots more as human, I think, is very interesting. I think if people have been following a lot of developments in robotics, and particularly in companion robotics, the way that they're developing in old folks' home, elderly care, certainly simulated pets for children, but Japan is, just booming with companion robots, and the notion of elderly care companions who you could interact with and have some sort of, I guess, conversational capacity, but also functional capacity, daily living needs, assistance kind of stuff. And huge market. I mean, it's not just in Japan. This is a market that's growing all around the world. If people aren't aware of the role of robotics in elderly care, I think they should sort of follow up on some of this. But I think one of the interesting aspects of this is that B.F. Skinner has come back with a kind of vengeance as we'll call him the hero poster child, right? The patron saint of contemporary robotics. That people say, well, what you need to do is adopt a kind of behaviorist paradigm, and you say that if a robot can perform the behavior that a person can do, well, then it's doing that. And so you ask the question, can a robot care? Now, what's so interesting is that in some way, the robot, by being unable to care in what we mean by caring, is in a behavioristic way, in a kind of Skinnerian way, it's able to care superlatively in a way that a human just could never compete with. Okay, so let me see if I can explain that even more. That the human capacity to care it's based on, or sort of grounded in, a lack of care or the capacity to be neglectful, or because care is a accomplishment or achievement, we can have the deficit quality of care, just uncaring. And the robot can be programmed to, quote, care, that is, to display all the behavioral characteristics that we associate with caring. Now, so you're an old person, you're in need of assistance, and you're in an old folks' home, your kids are too busy to come and take care of you. Now, do you want an underpaid orderly who's in a bad mood, who's really kind of irritated with you, and maybe not, I guess, receptive to your concerns, and maybe you've just, crapped your diaper for the second time, and you're embarrassed, and you're frustrated, and you want some assistance? Do you want the less than caring orderly who comes in and is disgruntled and kind of, or do you want the happy robot who comes in and says, oops, did you have an accident here? Let me get that taken care of. I'm sure that's very irritating, and gives all of the outward displays, behavioristic programming of caring. I think it raises really interesting questions about what do people want. And see, it's further interesting because if you look at the history of philosophy, there is a sense in which the problem of other minds has haunted philosophers. The question of realism, idealism. It's a debate that it's got ancient concerns with it. Right, goes all the way back. And I think if you try to track what does that mean, right? What does it mean that we will now think of robots as companions, and if we're able to program the behavior that we want, I guess, is that good enough? I mean, if we've never been able to prove the existence of minds anyway, in some robust sense, or if it's still a conjecture that remains open to philosophical dispute, why wouldn't a person say, yeah, I guess I'm just going to build my life around a companionate robot, and I will I'll be happy that way. And I will have a world that's completely under control. It won't be so messy. Like imagine some person who says to himself, I'm volatile. I'm a wreck. I have mood swings. And anyone who cares about me, falls in love with me, they would be, subject to my whims. And they say, well, I'd probably be better off with a robot caring for me because then they couldn't be upset. And she actually gives a case of a person who thinks it would be in other people's better interest to stay away, and that a robot companion is probably really only what he deserves. And I think it raises the most profound questions of what do we want? And, I don't know what the we is. I think, from my perspective, I don't think there's any stop in the robotics movement. I don't think there's any stop on a collective front. I myself want to be a lagging drag late adopter. I do not plan on being cutting edge. I do not plan on getting a companion robot. I mean, we'll see when I'm there what I will do. I don't know what other people think. Have you seen the book? Are you interested in the possibility of your sons and daughters marrying a robot? How would you feel about that? And would love to hear more from people. Okay, thanks.